Alright, everybody. For today's industry insight, we're going to be talking about some, well, sadly depressing news that has came out on Nintendo. Over the last few days, Nintendo has been revealing more details regarding the Switch's online service. This is something that has been in development now since the system was released, and they are planning to roll it out in September. Some of the major features, of course, include multiplayer access for games like Mario Kart, Splatoon, and ARMS, cloud-based saving, and of course, they're going to be offering NES games that have multiplayer and online connectivity. And while that certainly calls for celebration, there is a bit of a damper. And that is that Nintendo has announced that they are deciding to discontinue, something just fell right there in shock, discontinue the virtual console option. Now, this is a very big deal, and it has to do with, or it has to factor into game preservation, as well as Nintendo's own stance on preserving its history. Now, for the PC fans watching this right now, the Virtual Console was an option introduced during the Wii period and was extended to the Wii U. And what it was the option to buy classic games from NES to the N64 era and have them run emulation-wise on the Wii and the Wii U. And this, of course, included games from Nintendo, games from third or second-party developers, and even Japanese exclusive games that were released exclusively on the Nintendo system. One of the more famous examples was Sin and Punishment, developed by noted Japanese developer Treasure. And when we last spoke about game preservation, I talked about how this was a big deal, not only for Nintendo, but for console games in general. As we've said before, game preservation is an often overlooked area of the game industry, and it's one area where game developers and major companies are horrible at. Now, as we know, it costs money to keep these games going and keep them supported. And this is why, whenever we look at games being remastered or re-released, we know the biggies that are going to come out. You know, whenever there's a PlayStation 5, that chances are we're going to see God of War on there. You know that Nintendo will always, in some way, shape, or form, get a Metroid game on a console, or allowing you to play Super Metroid. Of course, Halo, Gears of War, the big ones, you know those are going to be around. But there are much more in terms of game releases out there that most gamers today either don't know or have never really had a chance to play. And again, while we're always certain we're going to get a Mario game or ports or re-releases of classic Mario titles, what about games like, Battle Crush? Now even I don't remember. It's been so long. The Super Scope mech fighting game from way back in the day. What about titles like Kickle Cubicle, Fire and Ice, the loads of amazing SNES titles, and so on and so forth. And this is why the Virtual Console was such a great idea, because it allowed gamers a secured and legal way to download and play these games. And of course, being attached to their Nintendo account allowed them to transfer things over. But when we last spoke about this, I brought up my concerns, and this was at least 6 months to a year ago, that while the Virtual Console was a great idea, we couldn't rely on it forever, and hence today's video right here. Because if the company decides to stop supporting it, what do you do going forward? The same thoughts I have about the PlayStation Now service, and even the games that they have currently running. One of the more annoying things about the PSN, or the games you can buy on there, is that they are broken down based on what platforms are supported. So you have some PlayStation 2 games that can only run on PlayStation 3. You have some that work on PlayStation 4. There are even some that work on PSP and PSP Vita. But it's not universal. And that is a serious problem. And game preservation, like I said, is a very critical part about the game industry and its history. On our previous video, I talked about modern retro game design and how many gamers look to the past. But it's becoming harder and harder to find these games. Again, the big names, chances are you're going not to look too hard to get. but there are so many more games out there. And yes, not all of them are going to be up to the same standards as Castlevania Symphony of the Night, Tomba, Parasite Eve, and so on. But that doesn't exclude them from being remembered and for people to study them. Now, this is not going to be the last time we're going to talk about game preservation, but when it comes to Nintendo, they are, of course, one of the most, protective companies of their brand IP. Hence why you can't play too many Nintendo games on YouTube without them monetizing the videos or taking the advertisements. So you would think that they would be more than happy to make sure people can play their older games. And this is one thing that PC gamers have thankfully had an answer for since the beginning of this decade with GOG, or Good Old Games, developed by CD Projekt Red. GOG, when it was first announced, and I always keep coming back to it, was a huge deal, and has since grown to being one of the best ways for PC gamers, new and old, to recapture these classic games. And again, big titles are going to be kept supported by their major companies. Nintendo's not going to stop you or stop making Paper Mario games or Mario and Luigi. But there are plenty more games that are either too niche or just more of a novelty out there for people to play. And if you look at GOG's back catalog, it includes a wide berth of games. It's got stuff like Baldur's Gate, Neverwinter Nights. I think it has Planescape Torment as well. And then it's got crazy games like Pizza Tycoon, Gremlins, and even more niche titles like the original Might and Magic series. What was it? I always forget this other one that it's going to probably come to me later. But there are a lot of games on GOG that aren't, grandmaster amazing titles. But that's okay, because you never know where inspiration is going to strike, and history is history. You can't just, ignore the games that didn't succeed and only plaster the amazing, mega amazing titles like Metroid over here. And I've said this before, and I'll say again to wrap up today's industry insight. I still think we need a console equivalent of GOG, because you cannot, unfortunately, trust the company itself to maintain these games, as people who are fans of the titles published by EA can certainly attest to. And with Nintendo, the time has unfortunately finally came. And I don't know what they're going to do for the people who have bought all their games on the Wii and the Wii U during the Virtual Console period. But this is a major worry, and it's one that's only going to get harder and harder, or worse and worse, I should say, as the months and years go by. Again, the game industry is terrible when it comes to preservation. I mean, it's getting hard to find games 5 to 10 years ago, let alone 20 to 25. And we're getting to the point where games from the 90s are like buried mystical treasures that have to be dug up, or you have to pay an arm and a leg for. And that's not really how things should be. Again, video games are both an art and a product. And the art side definitely justifies allowing them to be experienced. Now, I know people will say, well, you should be able to spend lots of money to acquire them. But I think there has to be some kind of statute of limitations on that point. Again, how many people are really clamoring to play Solar Jetman or Cubicle, The Adventures of Lolo, or I think it was a game called like Princess Tomato or something like that? It's going to be a few people, and the rest are just going to want experience for more of the nostalgia or historical side. So I still think we need that option out there, because again, it's only going to get worse, and if we're not careful, a lot of people are going to miss playing these games. Now, there is a greater discussion to be had about just, is there a need for game preservation? Because as we've said, for a lot of people, they view games as a product, just like an iPhone or computer hardware, where once the next version is out, you toss out the old. But as I'm aware, as I'm sure you watching this right now, games have more value than that. There's a reason why we still go back to playing games like King of Dragon Pass, XCOM, Myst, Oddworld, you name it. And that artistic quality is not something that you can easily quantify. And in many cases, some of the best games never became massive sellers, as one of my favorites, The World Ends With You, can certainly attest to. And what happens then is that these games, despite how great or original their game design was, they kind of just disappear into the ether. In favor, of course, the umpteenth release of Mario, Kirby, God of War, Ratchet and Clank, and so on. And again, I am not discounting those games. All the ones I mentioned were amazing. But there are many, many more titles out there than just the most notable ones. And it's just very troubling by the fact that, are we going to be able to still play these games in 10 to 15 years from now? Right now, at the time of this recording, God of War, the PS4 version, or the latest one, is, swimming in accolades and high reviews. But in 10 to 15 years from now, are people going to still be able to play that game? What about any Game of the Year winner of the last decade? I don't know. And it's not a good position to be in. But with that said, we're going to wrap things up here. Let me know what you think in the comments below, especially if you are a developer. And I just want to get your thoughts on, how do you view game preservation? And is there an alternative that we're missing? But be sure to check back for daily discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. You can say goodbye to Samus here before we go. But otherwise, have a great night, and I'll see you all next time. Before we get to the credits, I just want to give a quick shout out to the fans and supporters over on patreon.com/GWBycer. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Check back around 10 Eastern for regular streaming. If you'd like to suggest games for me to cover or topics to talk about, let me know in the comments below. For a collection of my writings as well as weekly podcasts on design, check out game-wisdom.com. To support the Game Wisdom Patreon, you can find us on there on patreon.com/GWBycer. $1 will get you into our private Discord channel where we talk game topics and more. $5 will get you voting privileges for any major event, including the Saturday Night Grab Bag, Patreon-funded goals, and more. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you enjoy more videos here on the Game Wisdom YouTube channel.